it was one of America's most notorious presidential scandals that almost cost Ronald Reagan his presidency. The Iran-Contra Affair. In the early 1980s, the U.S. was still in a Cold War with Russia, and anti-communist sentiment was strong. During his presidential campaign, Reagan promised to assist anti-communist insurgencies around the world. For a brief time under Reagan, the CIA trained and assisted groups fighting communist leaders abroad. Reagan was particularly interested in a group called the CONTRAS and their battle in Nicaragua. The CONTRAS were a group battling the Cuban-backed SANDINISTAS, a communist group who had seized power in 1979. Reagan called the CONTRAS the moral equivalent of our founding fathers. But much of the CONTRAS funding came from the cocaine trade. Because of this, Congress passed the Bolin Amendment, specifically aimed at keeping American money from funding the group. That happened in 1982, shortly after Reagan took office. The amendment restricted the CIA and Department of Defense from using funds to provide military assistance to groups that were trying to overthrow Nicaragua's government, groups like the Contras. This didn't stop Reagan. The president told his national security advisor, Robert McFarlane, to help the Contras anyway, regardless of the cost. McFarlane found opportunity in Iran. In 1985, an Iranian-backed terrorist group held 7 American hostages in Lebanon. Reagan insisted his advisors find a way to bring the hostages home, saying, "I want you to do whatever you have to do to help these people keep body and soul together." So with permission from Reagan, McFarlane made a deal. The U.S. would give Iran weapons, and Iran would broker the release of the hostages. This happened even though Reagan publicly insisted he would not negotiate with terrorists, and despite the fact that there was a trade embargo with Iran. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. The deal with Iran didn't just secretly secure the release of the hostages in exchange for weapons. There was money involved. While $30 million had been allocated for the weapons, the CIA funneled a portion of that money to the Contras in Nicaragua, the group Reagan supported in their guerrilla fight against the Sandinista government. In 1986, the Lebanese newspaper Al-Shara reported the arms deal, and everything began to unravel. That prompted an investigation by the U.S. Attorney General, who discovered that only $12 million of the $30 million actually went toward weapons for Iran. The rest of the money was sent to the Contras in Nicaragua. The revelations were explosive. Reagan denied the allegations that he had negotiated with terrorists, but Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North came forward and acknowledged that he diverted funds to the Contras. North also said Reagan knew about it. North's testimony would inspire the press and Congress to launch investigations against Reagan for the rest of his presidency. Texas Senator John Tower led the investigation into the scandal. The Tower Commission determined it was Reagan's lack of oversight that allowed Iran-Contra to happen, but did not implicate Reagan directly. It wasn't until another congressional investigation in 1987 that Reagan finally testified. On May 5, 1987, joint hearings were televised investigating the covert arms deal with Iran and the assistance to Nicaragua. The hearings would go on for 41 days. Reagan was never charged, but McFarlane, Oliver North, 4 CIA officers, 5 government contractors, and Reagan's national security advisor, John Poindexter, were all found guilty. Yet, speculation about Reagan's involvement lingered on. Press investigations would go on for years to follow. While Reagan's image suffered a bit, he still left office with one of the highest approval ratings of any president in U.S. history.